Adam, if industrial design were a 30-foot drop on a mountain bike, you would die.
That is true. Welcome to Engineer vs. Designer,
the podcast.
For product designers, engineers, and people who have watched way too many episodes of Mythbusters. My name is Adam, industrial designer of CADjunkie.com.
And my name is Josh, mechanical engineer of SolidSmack.com.
Each week's show is broken into three gnarly halves. This week we'll be talking about the Edge Factor, a new series about design, engineering, and making manufacturing sexy.
Oh yeah.
First we'll serve up the product design stories from this week's news courtesy of SolidSmack.com.
Followed by techie tips, tricks, and Q&A compliments of CADjunkie.com.
And finally, we're going to talk with special guest Jeremy Bout, producer of the Edge Factor and a new design competition called Reality Redesigned. Speaking to us from Underhouse Studios up in the Great White North.
He's in Canada.
Which is the only reason we could get him on the day before Thanksgiving. Thanks for being on.
Producer Jeremy Bout, it's a pleasure to have you with us today. If you were a Tim Hortons donut, which flavor would you be?
I would definitely fit into the sour cream glazed category.
Okay, Jeremy, that sounds interesting. Stay put. We're going to hear more from you as the show goes on. Josh Mings of SolidSmack.com. Speaking of bad Canadian fast food pastries, delight our fungiform papillae taste receptors with the saccharine cream filling of knowledge. What have you got for us this week?
Oh, yes. This week's SolidSmack update is brought to you in 3D modeling bliss by Siemens PLM. Accelerate design, reuse imported 3D data, and for a limited time, get a free license of Solid Edge when you buy another. Check it out at siemens.com/PLM/BOGO. Big news in the 3D printing world this week. 3D Systems continues their consumption of 3D print-related businesses.
Gobble, 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 gobble.
This time, it's printer manufacturer Z Corp, creators of the first full-color 3D printer. This is part of a larger acquisition of Z Corp's sister company, VDAR Systems. Total price 3D Systems will pay for both is $137 million.
Kind of a big deal, and T-Spine's 3.3 will be released this month with a hot new reverse engineering tool. This new tool allows you to fit T-spline surfaces to your scanned data, creating an editable, unified, watertight surface. The geometry is lightweight and fast. News of the release should hit tsplines.com real soon.
Very cool. UK policymakers and industry execs are bent on ridding the world of the perception that Britain doesn't make anything in a new campaign aimed at highlighting the wonders of UK manufacturing. The Make It in Great Britain campaign, championed by William Butler Adams from Brompton Bicycles, Michael Ryan of Bombardier Aerospace, and many others, will host a national competition to find cutting-edge products in Great Britain and feature innovative pieces of UK manufacturing in an exhibition at the Science Museum later next year.
That is a lot of words, Josh. Tommy Erlington is a sculptor creating animals, birds, and marine life from recycled materials and scrap. You'll see his work in sculpture parks at hubcapcreatures.com. Definitely recommend checking that out.
Cool. Adobe is rolling out 6 new photo editing design-centric apps for Android, iPhone coming later.
So exciting! New Tech is releasing Lightwave 11 with camera matching and ZBrush support.
And next week, Autodesk University will hit Las Vegas, where we're sure to find out more about their PLM venture and how it relates to media and manufacturing. So, Jeremy Bout, producer of the Edge Factor, show at edgefactor.com. What do you think about the UK's attempts to get rid of this perception that they don't make anything? I mean, is that even true?
Well, yeah, interesting. I mean, I think it's great that they're talking about it. I think in some ways it can be counterproductive to talk like that, simply from the standpoint that, yes, a lot of manufacturing isn't being done in the UK or, for that matter, here in Canada and the States, not like it used to be, but there's still a tremendous amount going on. And it's part of the problem, the perception. You know, people are thinking that it's not here, and in some ways that deepens the problem because it's invisible then to them.
You're kind of reaffirming the stereotype in a way.
Yeah, you're reaffirming the stereotype, and you know, so a lot of kids aren't going into manufacturing because they're hearing that it doesn't exist, and that's a serious problem. In fact, perhaps one of the biggest problems that some of these big aviation aerospace companies are facing today.
Yeah, I mean, you hear about this catch-22 where apparently there are you know, fewer and fewer manufacturing jobs, so we're told, and yet manufacturers are having trouble finding enough qualified people to do the work. that they do have.
Exactly right.
It seems much more effective to work with, I don't know, media or people that are already involved in manufacturing to make it more relevant, to bring more attention to it in the schools and the media outlets, kind of like what you're doing already, Jeremy.
Well, and it's why we're doing it. Because movies really, movies, television, media, the web, these are the influences of today's culture. And you got to, if you want to influence people, you got to speak their language, and that's what we're attempting to do with our product. There's some really awesome stuff going on, and we want to put it in a form and a format that is palatable.
Well, all this talk of manufacturing has made this oil-soaked sack of aluminum shavings look even more delicious than before. Adam O'Hearn of CADJunkie.com. The doughy lumps of flour in our skull cavities longs to be firmed up by the yeast of your knowledge. What have you got for us this week?
This week's CAD Junkie Q&A is brought to you by Siemens PLM. Solid Edge synchronous technology brings constraint-driven and history-free modeling together, making product design a breeze. Buy a seat of Solid Edge right now and get another one for free. Do it at siemens.com/PLM/BOGO. Since we're talking with Jeremy Bout of the Edge Factor show at edgefactor.com, I thought we could talk a little bit about the process behind putting together a show like his. I know a lot of people are curious. I in particular am. First, that you have to have the idea for the show, but then there's the story, writing the story, and doing the research and the scripting and coordinating guests and the camera crew and the equipment and the sponsors and shooting permits and logging shots and blah blah blah. And I mean, that's not to mention everything that has to happen in post once it's all shot. So, I mean, how does this process start for you, and how do you keep track of everything? This is way more complicated than designing a product. This is nuts.
Insanity.
Yeah. Well, I feel tired just hearing that list. That is my life. Indeed. It does require, to do something on the scale that we're doing, it does require a good team. But the reality of today's age is that you end up wearing a lot of hats. Back in the day, or even still in some cases, broadcast television, you've got a huge crew, everybody wears their hat, you're in a union, and don't cross the line. Lines are very blurry in independent filmmaking. So you wear a lot of hats and do a lot of projects. So as producer, exec producer, and host of this show, a lot of what you just talked about, sits on my shoulders. But I do have a fantastic team. Got an award-winning director. He helps pretty much shape what you see unfolding on the screen. But as you pointed out, that's really a small portion of, pulling something like this together. The great thing about Edge Factor is we're hitting on a topic, though, that people are really excited about. So to be honest with you, the story, you talk about selecting the story. Man, that is not a problem. We have stories coming from us from all over the world, and we have the pick of the best ones. I mentioned I was at Lockheed Martin, the F-35 last week. They're coming to us with that. They want us to talk about that. Talk about the Mars rover. Been to NASA, been with the company that did most of the. All of these are incredible stories. But they all come to us. So that makes the job a little bit easier from that standpoint.
It's so interesting. What we always do on the show, and I sound like a broken record, but what we always try to do is get people that straddle the lines between engineering and design. And you're kind of doing that in an interesting way, in two different interesting ways in my mind. One, you're doing a show about engineering, design, and manufacturing, and so kind of looking at all of those things at once. But also, in a way, like you mentioned earlier, your show is a product. Your show is your product. And there is both kind of a soft, gushy design side of it, and there's a very cold, hard engineering side of it as well. And as producer and host, you're definitely also walking like right down the middle of that line as well. Would you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. And you talk about how do we select stories. It's probably the biggest thing that we want to show is that a good design builds a good story. And, so unless there is really, a need for something and then somebody steps up and designs it, that's just in and of itself a very fascinating thing to be part of. And so we're always looking for that. It's where technology and design meet the human side of the story. That's probably one of the biggest criteria for us. And And that's the challenge for us, is to sort of walk both those lines when we're producing these things.
So how does the process start? You said you have stories coming to you. Somebody comes to you, Lockheed Martin comes to you and says, "Hey, we want to do this. We want you to showcase our stuff." Then how do you go about going from there?
I'm not even sure there's a formula for that. At this point, not getting too far ahead of ourselves in the discussion, but at this point, Edge Factor is doing more than just a show. We want to create that big sort of cinematic story that you got tingles watching. Then we want to create a reality show. So I'm not even sure it's the right term for it, because we're doing it in a way that's never really been done. But a reality show that tracks a design contest, but it's all revolving around the same theme of that big show. And then give designers the inside scoop on, it does start with a great idea, but that's just the beginning. Then track some of these ideas all the way through, from design through to rapid prototyping into the manufacturing world, and then the testing of the physical product with a pro rider at the end.
Just from a technical, just logistical standpoint, that sounds like a nightmare. I'm sure you're going to have just hours and hours and hundreds of hours of footage to deal with and to log and to hang on to while you put together the show. It just sounds like a pretty overwhelming undertaking.
It is. Reality Redesign's less so than Edge Factor, the show itself. Yeah, it is, because reality shows are raw. They're not meant to one camera, two camera angles tops for a given scene. Whereas when we shot our first Edge Factor production, we're shooting in 3D. We literally had 4 to 6 camera angles for some of those locations, and
4 to 6 3D camera angles.
3D camera angles. So suddenly you start thinking about post-production on that, and that's where the director and his team became invaluable, because as producer and host of this thing, I'm worrying about many things. I can't be thinking about that, and that's why you have to have such a great team around you.
Yeah. Well, how many episodes how often do you do an episode?
We were doing 2 a year. We are really in the baby stages of this thing, though, because it's only been a year and a half. So we produced 3 in the first, more or less, 12-month season. We are working currently on a once-a-year major production. So more of a documentary style. And out of that then comes a whole series of products. So you've got a reality show that comes out of it. You got the big cinematic production. You got a reality show that students can get involved with around the world. And then simultaneous to shooting the episode, we actually have a whole educational video series being shot that go into curriculums for schools. And we're literally developing that right now from the Gnarly Metal episode, and hope to be pushing that into schools around North America over the next few months.
Jeremy Bout, streams of smoke are shooting out my nipples and ears. That is amazing. I don't know how you handle it all.
And welcome back. Today we're chatting with Jeremy Bout, producer of the Edge Factor show at edgefactor.com.
We brought him on because both the Edge Factor and the Reality Redesigned contest deal with engineering and design in a very direct way, and are attempting to inspire young people to enter into design, engineering, and manufacturing in North America and abroad.
Indeed, Jeremy, we have some questions for you.
And we promise not to steal any of your ideas, fingers crossed.
Be careful, we'll steal them.
How did you get to know you wanted to be a producer, Jeremy, and how did you get started with that?
Oh, the term producer kind of shocked me when I first heard it, but I guess I realized that that's what I was. I got into media because I always loved music. Had a recording studio kind of in my basement that started as a bit of a joke and ended up starting to have bands in it. Then ultimately ended up getting into video and kind of never looked back. So for me, it was a gradual progression from sort of the design/manufacturing world into media. And that was ultimately how I came up with the idea for Edge Factor, because it was my kind of living my life, just People don't get how things are made anymore. People don't realize that this is an amazing field. There's, cool robotics, cool machines. There's all this great software. And so when I became a producer, I realized, you know what? I've got a unique perspective. I think I could do something with this. And it's been pretty crazy since.
So I guess you had this manufacturing in the back of your head. What drew you back to it?
Just the never lost my love for making things, I guess. There's
Nice.
really something cool about being presented with a problem, seeing the solution in your head, designing it in 3D, and then actually physically coming up with the solution personally. And I had that because I was a high-performance cutting tool manufacturer. So I literally got to work with race teams, companies in aerospace, medical fields, and we literally would be presented with the drawings, and we would have to come up with these high-performance cutting tools. So really enjoyed that, but I ended up loving media more. So for me, I got to actually end up doing both with this, which is really cool.
That is really cool. And what's also really cool is that the show, or at least the most recent show, focus on that in particular.
Yeah, it's mountain biking, specifically slope style mountain biking, which is, again, just like all of the stories, they come to us. I had a company come to me and say, you want to reach youth, and that was really our focus. We knew after the Chilean mine rescue story that we wanted our next one to be something that would communicate with our younger audience. In many ways, looking back, it was the perfect choice, simply because we hit a vein with it that we didn't realize going in that it would resound like this with a younger audience.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the footage in this is really intense. What's the most challenging part of shooting this, and what's your favorite part of putting a show together?
Wow, the most challenging is logistics for sure. Because it only takes. We've had a limited budget. We've had some great sponsors step up, but we're always trying to take what we get and do a great job with it. And so it's kind of like you don't have any room for a major catastrophic failure, and that's probably the number one concern is when we go out and shoot, weather / equipment. Some of these things are pretty, one-time shots, and you got to get your money shot. So that's probably one of the biggest challenges is with a low budget, working through some of those challenges. Definitely the most rewarding is hearing a teacher talk about the response in the classroom. That's probably because that is the goal. And then to hear that we've done what we set out to do, that's it's always great to watch the production too. But I'm so warped by the end of it, almost sick of it. So I never actually get to enjoy our own productions.
Do you have any examples you could share with us of things that teachers have told you that kids have said?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I've had, for example, I got a call a few weeks ago from a guy that said our local state here is running I didn't even know anything about this. He says they're running a competition on radio saying, show Edge Factor Gnarly Metal in your classroom, and then tomorrow at 2, the first 50 kids to call in will get free T-shirts.
Wow.
And it was so cool to see them leveraging what we had done.
Yeah.
To promote themselves and to promote manufacturing. And I've had a number of teachers come to me and say, I just wanted you to know that I had a young person come up to me this morning and they said, we're changing our major to manufacturing because they had watched Edge Factor the day before.
Wow. That's got to feel good.
Yeah, it does. It does. That I think demonstrates that this mechanism, this approach using media to communicate, that it works.
Jeremy, having you on the show has been even better than the time I ran my bike into the curb and dive bombed into the flower bed on purpose. Thanks so much for being with us.
Thanks, guys.
All right, if you would like to send spare bike parts to EvD HQ, please address them to Josh.
And if you'd like to spend spare Barbie parts, please address those to Josh as well. Engineer vs. Designer appreciates your comments. If you listen to the show and you like it, hate it, or whatever, head over to engineervsdesigner.com and let it rip. Insults are always welcome.
And if you want to see us reenact scenes from The Machinist, Be sure to like us, plus one us, follow us, or whatever else, as social media has been correlated with weight loss and hallucinations.
The show was edited by Simon Martin. Our theme music is by Ross Hartman.
We'll see you next week, and remember, without engineers, designers would be silly storybook illustrators.
And without designers, storybooks would be all about spherical trigonometry and steampunk.
I like steampunk.
You would.